Hello and welcome back, everybody, as we have had just a little break there, making sure that we guarantee that the teams are getting into this next match. Again, I am Rich right here along with Tiny Shiny, as we will be entering to one of the round-robin matches that we talked about earlier. Again, these are best of 3 that we are having for this Overwatch segment before transitioning into the Valorant portion of it. And realistically, I think this is going to be a good one.
I can agree with that as well. When we look at all of our Group A teams outside of ISU, there's a lot of these matches that have the potential to run relatively close. So when we're going to look back at these groups, our 2 teams that will be in our upcoming matchup are going to be the College of DuPage taking on the University of Minnesota.
Yeah, and again, with one of the big key factors we talked about towards the beginning portion of the desk is DuPage specifically, again, being the only real community college in this with such a vast amount of students participating into it. To be able to actually see a community college compete amongst some of these other four-year universities is, I think, something that's really exciting, because there's a lot anchoring onto that, because these are the students that are getting their education and then looking to move on to a 4-year university. So they have that opportunity of competitive play within that space and then can utilize that to convert into actually a 4-year university like we have with ISU or any really of the other ones that are going into this Midwest region.
Yeah, and with the College of DuPage specifically, right? I mean, they're a young program. This is their first year, I want to say, that they've been competing within Overwatch. This isn't a new environment for them, though. Scrim Center has been their home of a ton of tournaments that they've partaken in over the past semesters. And you got to turn to the other side, though. University of Minnesota, 4 out of their 5 players have been on the team since 2022. And especially when we're in this new patch, this new meta where so many things are up in the air of what's being played, a lot of that fallback can come to team synergy, and that's going to be one of their biggest strengths for Minnesota in this tournament.
Well, and we talk a little bit too about like the home field advantage and other sport dynamics, and you mentioning that specifically where they have been here. This is a place of comfort for them, where even when we talk about specifically like ISU, where they have to drive and travel to different locations to compete, even to them that can be sometimes stressful when you're not in your custom environment. You don't have the same type of feel, or what some people would say is land jitters that we've talked about in many occasions, where those type of psychological environmental differences can actually wear on the play, as we do get to take a look at the map that we're going to enter in for this best of 3, starting on Oasis.
Yes, we'll be starting out on Oasis, a map where it's interesting in regard that you can have several different compositions. University, that one you're going to tend to see more brawl. Unless you want to pull out a Winston, it's not out of the picture, but the brawl is usually where you're going to land. City Center. I want to see a Wrecking Ball just for funsies. Get the hamster out there. Let him stretch his little legs, have some tracers running around, and it allows them to have this variance in style to try out these different things against their opponent. This is likely the first time that these 2 teams are seeing each other within competition, so getting that understanding of their patterns, their strategies, is going to be big here. Well,
and the other thing, too, is since we've been talking to the coaches and getting information, because realistically, they're having to learn on the fly going into an event like this, that there's a lot of discussion about, poke compositions and rush compositions as well. Sigma being a hot topic. Of course, there's the discussion when we talk about the support line with the Zen changes that had recently come through, even with the minor adjustment and tweak that recently just happened this weekend as well. There was a building component on top of that adjustment, and really trying to see how that can work in the compositions, and at this point, if it's something that's still viable for them.
And you've had so many of those micro adjustments. I mean, it's been, what, not even 2 weeks since the new patch, which is the single biggest patch in Overwatch history, mind you, and then just more adjustments on top of that. Like, you are scrambling to get these ideas cooking and figuring out what is going to work best. A lot of those competitions have been a test to lead them up to this point. And now it does appear we will be starting out on University for our round number 1 here. The map that tends to lean more towards these brawl styles, which these teams seem to like.
And again, with that brawl aspect, there's a lot of discussion too. Even Junker Queen really being a option in some of this, which you can already see that we're going to have Pizza Pirates look to potentially bring out into this composition as we wait for that final selection. So really excited to see if we get to actually have that JQ into this, because the value that it can bring with the Jagged Blade, where you can really get somebody out of position, find someone vulnerable, and put them into an unfortunate position that they're just going to be completely capitalized on.
especially when you're running it against what DuPage seemed to think in the Ramatra, the ability to displace and kind of disengage with either that speed amp or the commanding shout. Big M of cooldowns here to kick us off. Of course, it will be the Pizza Pirates getting to that objective first, but you do not want to be in a small room with a MEI or a Ramatra. Wise Kite on out, allowing this tip damage to come through as Zihungi already in a lot of trouble. Huge immortality to keep them on their feet. And this is where Vin can choose to re-engage with the rest of the team. They're playing off those cooldowns and are managing to zone DuPage out for a small period of time before they come back in. It's a matter of who messes up the timing first, and in this case, it is the Junker Queen back up against the wall. Couple pummels putting down to the dirt.
I mean, that was such a great ebb and flow between the both of them to try and find a weak point. And Vid was so close to getting out of that position, but having that MEI wall there to completely zone and lock them into that corner had no real escape, and the commanding shout was already expended so early on that re-engagement. It wasn't nearly as opportunistic to survive through it as they re-engage it again.
They're going to go through, but they're walking straight into an at Majors. Kaiser built that up so quickly here, so DuPage had plenty of space to work with, and with all poor fellow is trying to isolate these players. Kuya was left out on their own, will manage to get back to the team, but not in one piece. I mean, look how much space DuPage Esports are taking right now. The Pizza Pirates are scattered and split, and eventually will be sent back to spawn.
Yeah, DuPage is really having an understanding of this. In addition to not only just the understanding of how this is playing out, but they have the ultimate economy. They were able to expend both of those support ultimates into this to guarantee that they take the advantage, because Pizza Pirates are really just playing at the disadvantage. They have not been able to accumulate those ultimates that they can actually have to counteract the way that DuPage is playing. And DuPage still has two significant ones, Annihilation and the Blizzard, as they enter again.
And like, that's all you do. You pop the Annihilation, and that commanding shout is turned into just straight up paper walking in. This Junker Queen, while it is fitting for the idea of a tempo here, they're committing extra ultimates. When you're down your tank, you're down your ability to push, and this is something DuPage would be happy to take. And the only advantage they have now after these ultimates expire is they have a tank, and Zihungi has to stay alive, help his team stabilize, and hope they can get more players back soon.
Akua brought a lot of value with the tactical advice. They're able to really turn the tide despite them having the Annihilation and the Blizzard really zoning and encapsulating Pizza Pirates here from Minnesota in that underpass, but they were able to weather the storm. Now they've got the Rampage, they've got a couple ultimates to their name because there was a lot utilized. It's really only going to be now this Deadeye that they have to use more so for zoning, and they're going to shoot to try and get this sound barrier to have a type of tempo control for DuPage on the engagement.
It's on to Dusk. Little bit behind Salami Boy in terms of that charge, which is something that Minnesota can use to their advantage, or at least what they wanted to do. The Rampage negated by Isuzu. That's why you bring the explosives into the play. Boom goes two, and that'll be a full wipe for Minnesota.
Yeah, boom goes the dynamite for sure with that pulse bomb. That's just a clever play, and again, there's just so much chaos that's happening in that archway, and the Rampage, even though it might not have gotten as much value initially, the fact that you're still getting it onto Zihungi, denying that survivability from that tank positioning, and at that point also the Suzu was already used moments earlier, so they don't have it to get themselves out in the clear as they re-engage again to hopefully swap it back.
I mean, it's a nice MEI wall, forces the shout out of Vind in a very passive manner, but now Zihungi is very, very deep. The team has to trade it out, but what can you do? Toadbeer is tearing the backline to pieces. All the while, the Pizza Pirates have managed to keep this fight an even trade, and now an even advantage one, because of what this Tracer has been able to accomplish.
They really have started to download the methodology and the way that DuPage is playing. Granted, now you do have almost 4 ultimates to go against Fellow, close to gaining that Blizzard as well, so there is a lot that they're going to have to match against this, but the good thing is that you're going to have Minnesota, specifically with both support ultimates available, and leaning into having another Pulse Bomb, which we've already seen from Cold, be able to get a double.
Right now, Pizza Pirates at advantage in the ultimates, but not exactly in the timing. It's Cold Beer to come up big. The sound barrier wasn't even an option for DuPage. Now they're going to have to fight this down, hoping this zoning ultimate, yes, it will get them the point back over, but they're down both their supports. Cold Beer is hunting them in the backline. You can't even get any value out of the Blizzard. You have too many down. The damage is completely obliterated. DuPage, what a comeback that they've had, but Minnesota are looking clean to take University right on back.
I mean, the biggest part of that is, again, we saw it from the very initial neutral that happened. It's that Pizza Pirates have really understood this dynamic of entering and disengaging, and also doing it so more formidably around the architecture. In this last fight, it is a perfect explanation of what they did earlier. DuPage leads in with the area of effect. They use the Deadeye so that they're going to zone them back. And nobody's caught out. Pizza Pirates at this point are free to just leave that point, give the few percentage up, and not really feel too worried because they are able to come back in with the ultimate economy that's still being reserved and having a bankroll that they can try and then attest back with, and ultimately giving them that better advantage to take that first round.
It's where that shot calling, that team synergy comes into play. You're relying on each individual to work together and engage and disengage accordingly. They showcased that wonderfully on the first round of attack, but now, Rich, they're playing it into a whole different ballgame.
No pun intended. Right? As we're going to see the little hammy himself swing around towards this position, taking the high ground. And again, they want to have that advantage because this is a massive dive team. Everyone on this DuPage needs to find it, but they actually get a poke out right anyways.
And that's probably the most valuable target you could get out of the major healing, and everyone else is just going to fall over like dominoes. DuPage really don't have a choice but to kind of roll their way on out. Pizza Pirates looking to get first cap.
Things get a little bit perplexing here, as you do have DuPage looking to go back. The staggers is not ideal, as you do have Zhungi looking to get back closely. His fellow, and just chilling on a bush for now. Why not?
Cool.
You've got time to regroup, but I think they are subtly aware of this, and realistically, it's still Zhungi left out in the open.
You don't die there. You can't die as the tank. DuPage needs you for that engage, and it's basically just a whole nother fight won for Minnesota.
That's okay.
Fellow
just having a good old time. Just like, guys, I'm waiting. I'm waiting to enter in onto this. We have to figure out. And my curious part is the dive seems a little bit dysfunctional here from DuPage, something like they're trying to make work, and it's just not yet, I think, as refined.
No, and it's arguably one of the most difficult comps to pull together as a team, timing this pile drives. And when one of your players gets picked off like this, you're relying on dual Cuticle Hat to go in on those dives. You don't have that tool. Suddenly, the whole machine can't operate, and you have to reset.
And it also makes me just wonder, too, about like the communication aspect of this. Is do they have, and have they had enough time with this patch and adjustment to be able to feel confidently for this engage? They're already surpassing this 50% marker, and I keep a watchful eye once again on Cold with that pulse bomb.
Has managed to find at least one target with it every time, but like, what do? There hasn't been a single 5v5 fight that we've seen since this initial engage, Rich, and that is brutal for a team like DuPage that they want to move fast, they want to go quick, but you can't take the fights at all.
And now, approaching this ever close last 30%, the time dwindles, as hopefully they're able to gain something. They've got almost a minefield and the Dragon Blade up, and the Sojourn swap could be enough, and that's a nice pick early, though.
DuPage, this is the way to get themselves back on the tempo. It is evened out, though. Minnesota have been holding on to a plethora of ultimates right now. First one out, Sound Barrier on the board. The minefield not meaning too much unless you're Vind stuck in the middle. DuPage, this is their chance to get that flip back over. They want to do it with the least amount of resources expended as possible, but that's not going to happen easily. Pizza Pirates very much think this is a winnable battle. Pulse bomb on out. It hits the tank, which he takes that like a champ. DuPage, both support ultimates is enough to push them over the edge, and let's flip it over at 99%.
I mean, everything was thrown into that engagement from Minnesota. They wanted to just keep
No way.
the lifeline. Okay, that happens. So, yeah, Sammy Boy, or Salami Boy is definitely having a field day right now on this. But
I want to point it out, too, that on the notes it was said Salami Boy is crazy on the Lucio. We're seeing it right now. But what can you really do if your teammates are just getting sliced in half? Well, maybe Vind has the answer. Rampage into the back, easily cleansed on through. But DuPage, I mean, they're still losing players. Even if they're negating all of the ultimates that are out, their dive, it's scattered. It's not coordinated enough to pin down one player, and it's coming back to bite them here.
I mean, and they're already at the 99%. They're guaranteed that if they just get this slow coverage and take down the remaining few, they're not going to have a full 5 in this moment. And they can let Zhungi get away as it's the overtime dwindling.
Yeah, Zhungi has to stall this out for as long as possible. If you can get Dude Cool Hat with an overclock back, perhaps there's a chance. I mean, they go down so late in that fight. The overtime respawns seem like they last eons, and the Pizza Pirates happy and healthy as ever, knowing that the map of Oasis is almost theirs to take. Kaiser, last one to fall. Is there anything left that DuPage has to say? There is not. Pizza Pirates cleanly handling Oasis.
Somebody sure sharpened their blade, as you saw in the kill feed towards the end of it. That was a lot of jagged blade kills. So we know that they have done their due diligence and have the grindstone ready at this, as we do see still the play of the game coming out by Zhungi, even though there was not the victory for them. The Wrecking Ball, again, still something that you touched on even before going into this, and the viability and usage of having this, but it just feels a little disjointed that when we move away from this map of control, I think it's going to be really important to see how they transition and go to that specifically, and what their map choice is going to be. Is it going to lean into maybe bringing a little bit more of this Wrecking Ball that's beneficial to them in the architecture or the way that they use that, because the tactical skill that's required when it comes to a wrecking ball player and to play proficiently, it's very high in a skill ceiling.
Again, it's arguably one of the hardest compositions that you can pull as a team. But a big reason for that is because it's very difficult to counteract. If you have a team that's all on the same page with your pile drives, you have the tracer going in on the follow-up, then you're essentially unstoppable. But because there were so few occasions they were actually able to execute these dives, they just kind of kept running in circles, were lost, and by the time they figured out how to properly execute it, it was too late. Your opponents had 99%. So when you mention those future map types, which I believe are going to Flashpoint for our next map, which has a lot of opportunity for this to come through, it's just a matter of, do you really think you can manage to pull it off as a team against Minnesota, who's been tearing them apart from the inside?
And it's a lot to do with just their tempo. There has been so many coaches and teams that have really said it's green means go right now in the current state of what we've seen in the change of patch notes and the way that they've been playing compositionally. And being able to have that type of on-command rush type style, there is that setup required for the wrecking ball. And maybe not as much because it's a little more on-demand with the Winston because you can initiate more quickly in that aspect. But with the wrecking ball, you have to truly understand the technical part of it and the timing, which you've touched on. And with a tracer, it really has to be critical in the way that they communicate this. Whereas when you see on the other end of it, Cole able to get a pulse bomb on 2 separate fight occasions just in the back amongst the chaos that's happening. Granted, that was with the Ramatra, but it's still getting massive value. When the tracer is unchecked in that point, they can just really run rampant in the back.
And that's really what we saw throughout that map, is Cold played an integral part to Minnesota's success. Never was really in the front line because they were just there like, hey, look at me, I'm tearing you apart, and managed to pick up 2 to 3 players, which is incredible for a tracer, and that's why they're taking that split approach. They're not, it's hard for their opponents to figure out, like, do we look at the tracer? Do we look at the front line? Like, you're going to lose people regardless. You just need to pick which battle you're taking, and so far it doesn't seem they're on the same page with that.
And Vid's also just getting so much assistance from the support. Like, they are really, really enabling this Junker Queen to gain the maximum value that's available to them, because the commanding shout rotation and knowing when that Suzu was available, or even just the coverage of the movement speed from the Lucio, everything is really on point right now, and you can tell that the reason why the Junker Queen is working is because they've ran this consistently.
And you know, it's that big part of that synergy. I keep bringing that up again, but it's just so impressive to me how the Pizza Pirates are always like pulling forwards and back. Like, they have this perfect balance of push and pull that gets them winning fights, even if they last longer. Like, the longer it goes, the better it is for them. And a map that is very important with that kind of tempo is Escort. I apologize, I was mistaken. So we are going to Escort for map number 2.
Going to be changing it up on you.
We're
we want to
changing
keep
it
you
up
on your toes as well.
Yeah, keeping everyone on it. Exactly.
But, I mean, and also even further when it comes to, you know, that ebb and flow like you're mentioning, that's where you really talk about the understanding of, like, this macro play. Like, we talk so much about, like, the micro play and how, like, these little nuanceical things, but also just understanding the fundamental factors of how to communicate with your team, understanding and how they can move as a singular unit. It's not just that independent cogwheel amongst the mechanism, is what we really see a lot of teams do well in competition like this, and being able to have that fundamental understanding and then carry it over into their games. And when you're going to be competing against teams like ISU, who we know so heavily, you have to have such a well-rounded understanding of those fundamentals, because that allows you to be able to perform at a higher pace.
And we're going to see that even more, especially if we stick with this ball composition, is what happens when a cog is removed from the occasion. Can the machine continue to operate? Do we need to get a factory reset on it? Like, what really needs to happen? And those are the kind of decisions that you need to make instantly. You're losing time, you're losing percentage, and eventually the map, if you're not careful with how quickly you're actively communicating with each other. And a map such as Dorado, where positioning is the name of the game, is going to highlight that.
Yeah, and this is one we talk a lot about too, especially when it comes towards that later phase. I mean, realistically, even in the initial part of it, you have so many elevated high ground positions that you can utilize to anchor yourself on if they want to go into more of a hit scan type of realm, where there is discussion of seeing, you know, Widow in the case, or even the Ash being brought into this, because when you find in a couple of those choke points a clever dynamite or something of that nature to try and stop that momentum forward, it can generate not only the ultimate so quickly, but also just get that chip damage across the board on who is going to be moving through those chokes. We do get to take a look at the composition, at least defensively, effectively here and know exactly what they're going to bring to the table, which is Zhongi more so on this Diva and going to couple it now with that final selection of the Genji. So they're looking for still heavy movement and to dive onto things while still residing with this opportunity of that one-shot hit mechanic from the Sojourn that can be brought in.
Yeah, and, you know, we didn't really talk too much about the Diva and the potential compositions that come up because she's very much of a it's gonna work or it's not pick. And like you're coming out assuming that Vind is on the Winston, which lucky for you, you won the lottery essentially. Vind is on that. So Diva can do pretty well with kind of moving the monkey away from your team, understanding that Kaiser and Dawn to Dusk will be in a bit of trouble here. Dive up early just to displace the high ground, but Diva has these boosters online. You can move from building to building, and this makes this map incredibly challenging to move through.
Salami Boy's really been punishing as well with these boosts. We've already seen eliminations in that previous control map, but now also really still being able to zone and manage that high ground position to deny the accessibility by Zhongi is really important to them as the dive comes in quickly by Vin.
Yeah, this is speed movement, and look at this. Pizza Pirates haven't really done anything to threaten DuPage's life. They're just backing up. I mean, we're basically knocking on the gates of this objective. You need to engage sometimes. Zungi recognizes that, goes in. You lose the Moira on the side of the attackers. It's a great pickoff. Are they able to steamroll it more? Vind is playing on limited time, decides to take the aggressive initiative, which is just what Minnesota had to do in that moment. Once again, their decision-making and ability to close out these fights is impressive.
I mean, the challenge, too, is when you lose the Moira, you have so much healing that is lost when they got the early pick. But despite that, there was still really great target calling coming out from Minnesota because they were able to turn it, despite them only having Salami Boy on the Lucio for that utility in AoE healing, which still proportionally is not nearly as much as the Moira brings to the table. And look at how far forward they're playing to gain that extra space.
And this is just coming down to the idea of the Pizza Pirates know where they need to be on this map, and they know where DuPage wants to be. They're going to get there first and prevent them from going in these spots. And like, look at that. It's another boot from Salami Boy. The Winston has to dive back up. Is so low. Gensouki's alive. No, Akuya with the final dash, looking for a couple more. Sound Barrier, though, will be in his way. Well, that might be the back off. DuPage are going to have to press that S key themselves. They are down several, and staggers here would be brutal.
Yeah, giving ground is absolutely necessary for DuPage. They have unfortunately found themselves in two. I just let a cold sleep. No, that's fine. You know, I saw him alone. I'm just gonna keep it as payload. You don't really need my tracer play. A pulse bomb I'll hold for later. As Akua needs to be very careful up on this high ground.
Yeah, it might be the tickle cannon, but that thing hurts if you stay in the range for too long. And Akuya starting to find that out. Zungi breaks free from the chokehold, but where's the team to back them up? Eventually, Kaiser will manage to meet, but no, the sticky comes through, manages to stay alive for a tiny bit longer. Nowhere near enough, though, to put any sort of dampener on the Pizza Pirate success. Rich, they're looking straight down to second point gap.
Yeah, and with this now going to be accumulated, it will be a massive time bank for Minnesota to work with, aggressing forward. Vin just, again, continuing to punish any that still remain.
This is brutal. I mean, you're walking to the third point with 5 minutes. You're continuing to pick up these eliminations, and not even to mention the ultimate economy right now.
Yeah, and that's, again, going to amass here shortly, with going to be all 4 of them. But DuPage, that's really their only lifeline here. They need to rely on this Coalescence, Primal, and Blade to turn this around.
You have options, but the execution, I mean, what's going to happen? Slimy Boy's been holding on to this sound barrier since seemingly the first objective, and you need to take some sort of initiative. DuPage have been on the back seats now. They're the ones jumping in, looking for the players. It's a sound barrier out early. That could open the door for Fellow later on if they manage to stay alive, but no, they go down to Takuya, who removed the blade from the sheath first and puts 2 down to the grave. DuPage Esports, this was their chance to turn it around, and suddenly, it's gone.
There's just so much organized chaos here. Like, Minnesota really understands that when things get a little bit tricky and they're not potentially going to be able to win the fight, they know how to draw back, reevaluate, and then re-engage. And DuPage can't quite find that same pace to be able to counteract against it. And now they're opting to have to make the swap back to the Diva in this desperate moment to put onto it and also compete with 4 minutes in the time bank.
This is a difficult chance for DuPage Esports. They'll have these damage ults and the sound barrier to sustain it longer, but you need to hit your mark, and that is just the target you need to find. Cupcake is down. So is the majority of that healing. The first time that we're going to see Minnesota on the back and the losing foot. No, you got to get back on the payload, Fellow. Making it a close call. Thankfully, no C9s yet today.
Yeah, Salami Boy saying, I really, really want a Charlie Niner, and I want to be the one to bring it on the broadcast. As we've got now 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Again, this is a great position, though, to be able to defend against the oppression. As now you've got Pete's Pirates looking to find an avenue in with 2 ultimates to their name.
And this pulse bomb accuracy from Cold Beer has been impeccable. Looks for it, but no, Zuki! Read it like a book. Oh, that must be one tasty pulse bomb. And you're going to have to hope that keeps you full because you're down your Reaper. We were also banking on to win this fight. DuPage, they're falling apart despite an incredible play to open it up. Minnesota have once again taken the fight to their opponents, forcing the reaction side, and it seems this will be their last opportunity to react. The Death Blossom too little, too late.
Hail Mary when it comes to that self-destruct and the Death
Yep.
Blossom, but unfortunately cannot buy any more time, and there is still a lot of time in the bank despite them. Again, just about like a minute and a few seconds under for them to be able to have that swap of sides if you do see completion now by DuPage. But again, the biggest thing here, you touched on it a couple of times when it comes to Minnesota, that they're really being able to find these extremely great angles, and even with it readable with that tracer towards the end of it, with the consumption on the Diva. That's great. Like, you really did read it. But when you then put resources into that and try to counteract the tracer, hyper-focus onto it, you instantly have a get-out-of-jail-free card when it comes to the recall. So you're back to full, and then you re-engage it where Pizza Pirates have been evaluating, hey, we're going to kind of put you as a sacrificial lamb. That's totally fine. And then we're going to now come back in and take the advantage when you have the blade, which finds massive value on the support line into the back, which they've not been as key to focusing on. And again, it's also just how quickly Pizza Party's been generating these ultimates, because it's the tracking that's going to be challenging. And I'm so looking forward to seeing what the actual locked-in composition is going to be from DuPage, and if they bring something like this out, because now you talk again, there's so many different angles that you can take with the Wrecking Ball, but execution, as we've both emphasized, is the key factor here for its success. And going against Pizza Pirates, who've played so proficiently right now, I'm not sure if it's enough.
And to add to that point, who realistically are you trying to dive once this comes out? There's no Soldier, there's no Sojourn, and even the Moira perhaps is your best option once that fade is gone. And this is a great challenge that DuPage Esports are electing to take up with the hope to ideally dislodge their opponents. You need to get Zihungi in a spot where they can perform these roll-throughs and pile drives, hopefully get a DPS to go, but yeah, you know, you lose your Genji right off the bat. Any setup you had before, completely negated.
Puts them back into spawn for now. Curious if they opt to make any adjustments, or they just look for the top up. Not quite yet broken, so we wait away from this Wrecking Ball composition. And again, still managing the high ground here, and you said it perfectly when the fact that they don't really have a dive target. You can see that at this point, Zihungi does not quite yet have the best target. They're looking to push back, and a great boot comes in to try and give some assistance, but they can't quite get an execution.
No, I mean, even Salami Boy got so low, has the efficient mechanics, had the healing, but that's the target they wanted to find, the pile drive, the tracer execution. Picture perfect. Now you got to do it again before the Pizza Pirates tear your team apart. It is an even trade. Oh, I would say that if you had a Genji on the board. Colbier and Akuya are the deadly duo that DuPage Esports has been unable to break through thus far.
And now almost half the time bank dwindled completely before even really reaching this archway. They've not been able to get to that point and they're consistently having to anchor around this corner. And there's so many different angles at which that Pizza Party can play off of. They're consistently residing close with the Genji Lucio for that extra movement speed. This angle that you're going to have from Zihungi is a nice one to try and engage, but again, they're so spread out, you really have to actually guarantee that you get the elimination when you go in.
I mean, they did force the fade out of Cupcake on the high ground, and while they get so incredibly low, they're on their feet, and Vin manages to grab both of the supports in the backline, and this is just what the Pizza Pirates are doing. They're waiting for DuPage Esports to go in. They find the vulnerable underbelly and just drive their spear through.
If there's ever a moment that they would look to try and make a change, it has to be sometime soon, because you're at that 2-minute marker. It's either do or die, where you have to use this minefield and the ultimate economy that you're leaning into. Dawn going to be so close to the Soundberry, which they can use again as a tempo control where they want to look for an engagement or potentially just try and get that Kitsune rush to also find value. But everyone for Pizza Party could just disengage.
You have the minefield on the high ground. Everyone's out except for Cupcake. The fade didn't come up in time. It's going to be a devastating blow. DuPage, best opportunity they've had thus far on the attack. The Pizza Pirates are willing to take a backseat for now, get their Moira in the fight before anything else happens. DuPage, they need to act now before they go down. It is the trade for Akuya, the Kitsune Rush, hoping to push them forwards. A little bit of extra health on the board. Don Duck sitting on a sound barrier that we're not going to see anytime soon, Rich.
That Primal Rage securing everything right now.
Bomb.
And here's the thing, though, is that you only had to commit Vin's Primal Rage. That's it. So you've got 60 seconds now where you have 4 ultimates to completely hold this defensive line near that fountain. And DuPage has such a mountain to climb with what they contributed previously.
DuPage, they're looking for a miracle right now. The sound barrier can only accomplish so much in this regard. You need to have an execution of a dive, get the Genji back in the mix, and that blade has to be massive. Akuya, though, first one to pull it out, and again, it was way too long. Pizza Pirates, all right, you're not going to do anything, fine. We're going to take the fight to you. That's 3, down to the final blows of Vinden. They still held on to that blade. The sound barrier is gone, and now your chances even slimmer.
I mean, the good thing is at least you forced out those ultimates. It's the really only Cupcake is the one that you have to keep an eye on. That Coalescence is going to be so important for them to be able to get that throughput healing necessary, as now with DuPage specifically having this last opportunity to try and engage it. They're going to go in with the blade, though. Got to keep an eye on it.
Gonna pop it out now, looking for a target. Finds the dash. Cupcake fades right out, and the blade is started as soon as it ends. It's overtime now. DuPage need to get themselves on the objective as soon as possible. Yet their numbers are dwindling. The Pizza Pirates have showcased near perfection on this dive defense, Rich. One of the most challenging things to pull off with such a composition, and yet they do it here to take the round robin 2-0.
Quick work, I would say. Still a worthy effort, an attempt coming out by DuPage, as they have managed to actually get, play the games. Can't discredit them for that part of it. But realistically, and again, this is why it's so nice in the round-robin stages to be able to get and understand the types of competition that you're facing off against, and also really being able to see when so many culminate from this Midwest region, that you can now better understand how to evaluate. And going into day 2, they still have matches to play today, so there is many more things that they're going to learn and have to adapt to moving forward. But now they can start looking at the strengths and weaknesses of how their opponents played and what they need to really level up moving forward. And being able to evaluate those things and in the short run, be able to make those changes for tomorrow, that's what you really have to look forward to.
Again, it's on that flexibility, that adaptation, who is able to learn the most from their mistakes and their successes alike. And it's not to say that DuPage, they still looked really good on their Ramantra.
Yeah.
When we did see it, it's just that Minnesota and Vind being on that Junker Queen was one step above. And I want them to take a look back at what went well today, the few dives that they did manage to execute and gain significant value from, and understand how that happened and how they can replicate it.
Well, and even just understanding, like, when it came to the mirror as well. That was, I think, a part that I did at least like to see, where you're trying to go toe-to-toe, especially with the Winston play, because there was still some dive-centric dynamics to the way that DuPage played, and I think that that did favor to them, but it was always behind the 8 ball. You already had 2 or 3 ultimates that were already online, a couple of abilities had already been expended defensively in the neutral engagements that were coming through, so they just could never find themselves getting the early advantage to actually apply as much significant pressure as you had from Minnesota. So with that, that's again, that timing, that tempo, and that understanding of how this fight and just the overall match is progressing.
And it's going to be a testament of that, because you're not going to get one team that isn't willing to flex around as much, even if it's maybe a Ramantra to a Junker Queen. It's a whole new game that they're attempting to play, Rich.
And with that being concluded for now, we still have a lot more Overwatch ahead of us, and who knows what those compositions are going to look like. So it's going to be a whirlwind ahead of us, friends. So we're going to head to a short break before we get into that next one, so don't go anywhere, because I know we're all looking to see what's going to unfold.